I met Owen 5 years ago in college. We clicked immediately, same dry sense of humor, same addiction to 2A, takeout, same quiet understanding that life was heavier than we let on. He never made a big deal about me being gay, never asked invasive questions or tiptoed around it. We just were, and that was enough. Last weekend, he invited me to his family's cabin for a short getaway. "You need a reset," he said, pushing a bottle of iced coffee into my hand like it was medicine, and he was right. My last relationship had dissolved into a string of unread texts and mutual ghosting. I hadn't felt wanted or even seen in months. Where Owen was expressive and talkative, Caleb was unreadable, still waters and all that. The air was crisp, filled with the sound of chirping insects and the distant trickle of water from the nearby stream. He handed me a beer, and I took it, grateful for the excuse not to speak. He had this calmness about him that felt rehearsed, like he carried secrets too carefully packed to spill. Mornings were coffee and scrambled eggs, afternoons filled with walks down leaf-dappled trails. Owen talked about his new job in finance, how New York was exhausting but alive. Caleb mostly listened, speaking only when necessary, always with that same measured detachment. Eventually I excused myself and went to the guest room. The bed creaked as I climbed in, the sheets cool and faintly scented with cedar. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the wind. I remembered how I used to glance at him during visits to Owen's place, never long enough to be obvious, but just enough to wonder. The cabin was tucked away in upstate Vermont, all pine-wood panels and the soft hush of trees in the wind. The edge of the bed dipped slightly. It was the kind of place where time slowed, where silence was not empty, but full. Owen's parents were out of town, and it was just the three of us, me, Owen, and his older brother Caleb. Once, while we played cards by the fireplace, his foot brushed mine. He didn't pull away. My mind raced, flooded with everything that made no sense. Why is he here? Did he think I invited this? Did I? I hadn't seen Caleb since college, but he was unforgettable. He greeted me at the cabin with a crooked smile. "Didn't expect to see you again," he said, voice low and dry. I couldn't tell if it was a welcome or a warning. His eyes lingered a moment too long, and I felt something twist in my chest, unease, curiosity, maybe both. Over the next day we fell into a loose rhythm. But sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. That night, after Owen went to bed early with a headache, Caleb and I lingered on the porch. "You ever think about leaving the city?" he asked, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "Sometimes," I said, "but loneliness travels." He looked over, surprised. Then nodded. We didn't say much after that. Maybe 10 minutes passed. Then I heard the door open softly, like someone trying not to be heard. My body stiffened. Footsteps padded across the wooden floor. Caleb, he didn't say a word. Just climbed under the covers beside me. I didn't move. His arm brushed mine. Still, he said nothing. I stared into the dark, heartbeat thudding against my ribs, breath shallow. The silence between us stretched, thick, charged, impossible. I should have told him to leave. I should have called out for Owen. I should have gotten up and walked out. But I didn't. I stayed. Caleb lay still beside me, the space between our bodies taut with hesitation. The only light in the room came from the narrow crack under the door, a dim glow that traced the outline of his shoulder under the covers. I could feel the warmth of his skin, even though we weren't touching. Not quite. Seconds passed. Then minutes. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. Say something, I thought, but the words stayed trapped behind clenched teeth. Every possible sentence. "What are you doing?" "Why are you here?" "You should go," felt both too much and not enough. His voice was low, scratchy with tiredness or nerves. I couldn't tell which. He finally broke the silence. "I couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Neither could I replied. It was the truth, but it didn't mean what it sounded like. The silence returned, heavier now, almost expectant, then slowly his fingers brushed mine. It was tentative, like asking a question without words. I didn't pull away. I didn't move at all. My breath caught in my chest. 100 reasons to stop flashed through my mind. Owen. His hand came up to my jaw, fingers trembling slightly. I closed my eyes and let go. The fact that this was his brother. The impossibility of waking up tomorrow and pretending this didn't happen. Just nodded, like he understood the weight in my voice. and the occasional gust of wind brushing against the windows. His forehead nearly touched mine. The air between us was warm with breath and uncertainty, but I didn't pull away. Caleb shifted, turning toward me under the blankets. "You okay?" he asked, barely audible. "No," I said, and I meant it. He didn't laugh, didn't tease. Not just of Owen, but of whatever code I thought I lived by, and yet lying to myself would have been worse. Then he kissed me. It wasn't rough or rushed. It wasn't hesitant either. It was deliberate, like he'd been holding it in for too long. Just two men reaching for something in the dark, hoping it would hurt less than being alone. Guilt pooled in my stomach, acidic and dense. I wanted to cry, but the tears never came. His hands explored like he was trying to learn a language he'd only ever heard spoken. Mine trembled because part of me knew this wasn't a beginning. This was a line being crossed with full awareness. Time blurred after that. There were no loud moans or clothes ripped off in a frenzy, nothing cinematic or reckless. When it was over, neither of us spoke. We lay there, barely touching, listening to the creaks of the old house. I turned to him, voice dry. "What happens now?" He stared at the ceiling. "Nothing. This didn't happen." His words landed like cold water, not cruel, not angry, just final. I nodded, but my chest ached. I wasn't sure what I expected. A promise? An apology? Something other than nothing. Caleb sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. "Owen would never forgive me," he said quietly. I don't even know what this was. I wanted to say me neither, but I did know. It was a betrayal. He stood and glanced back once before slipping out the door, leaving only the scent of cedar and something more difficult to name. I lay there for what felt like hours, the sheets tangled around me like rope. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to pretend I was alone. Morning arrived like a slap. The soft rustle of trees outside, once calming, now felt accusatory. I woke alone, wrapped in the silence Caleb left behind. He smiled when he saw me. The air in the room was stale with everything we didn't say. I stared at the ceiling, numb, rehearsing conversations I'd never have the courage to begin. By the time I walked into the kitchen, Owen was already at the stove, humming to himself as bacon sizzled in the pan. "You sleep okay?" Owen didn't notice the way I couldn't meet his eyes, the way my hands trembled around the mug of coffee he poured for me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, then broke apart like magnets pushed the wrong way. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. Either way, the lie between us settled like fog. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, thanks." "Good," he said, flipping a slice. "Caleb went for a run." Said he needed air. Of course he did, but what would I even say? "I slept with your brother?" It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. Caleb said he'd stay behind. I nodded along, offered half-hearted chuckles, but the room felt like it was closing in. I sat at the table and nodded like everything was normal. "It was good seeing you. You should come back soon." When Caleb returned, he entered through the back door, damp with sweat and flushed from the cold. He acted as if nothing had happened, casual, detached. The same calm exterior he always wore, now armor between us. I tried to make sense of what had happened, to fold it into something clean, but the truth was jagged. Not the comfortable kind we used to share, but a brittle silence full of words I couldn't say. Worse, I hadn't done it in a moment of passion or confusion. I'd chosen it quietly, willingly. Owen didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and kindness kept him quiet, not joy, not satisfaction. Something harder to name, a raw ache that felt almost like grief. I hated how well he wore it. I hated how I envied it. At breakfast, Owen joked about childhood memories, laughing through bites of toast, completely unaware of the fracture forming right under his feet. I thought Caleb might say something, a glance, a word, even just a moment of recognition, but he never looked my way. Then I locked the phone and placed it face down on the knitstand. And some secrets aren't born from malice, but from the unbearable weight of wanting something you know you can never keep. After the plates were cleared, Owen offered to take me into town for lunch before I headed back to the city. I hesitated, something in me desperate to stay just long enough to force a confrontation. Instead, I said, "Sure, let's go." The drive was quiet. When we reached the train station, Owen pulled my suitcase from the trunk and looked at me with a crooked smile. Hey, he said softer now. I forced a smile. Yeah, I'd like that. He pulled me into a hug, warm and familiar. I clung to it longer than I should have. On the train, I sat by the window and watched the trees blur into a smear of green and gold. I had betrayed a friend who trusted me, for a man who wouldn't even meet my eyes in daylight. And yet, beneath the guilt, there was something else. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened my phone to a new message. It was from Caleb. Don't tell him, please. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't reply. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed.